2:30 in the morning, and I'm sitting in my new chair in my tiny apartment, surrounded by moving boxes, alone. No one is expecting anything of me for the first time in my whole life. And for the last 20 years, it strikes me that I was never allowed to say what was on my heart. And now, this moment, I am allowed to say whatever the hell I want. And I'm going to say it. So I turn on my phone. And at 2:30 in the morning, I start telling him what I really think. And through sobs of grief and deep, deep gratitude, I start swearing. And boy, does it feel good. I gave myself permission to feel and really tell him what had happened to me. And it felt so empowering. And so how did I get there? How did I get in that spot? Well, it started many years ago. I had figured it out. You see, I fell in love. I fell in love deeply with that man, but I'd figured it out because the first guy I married was like this. He was a malignant, narcissistic alcoholic with PTSD who kind of was a little abusive. So let's just say I was never, ever bored. And one day I went, you know what? We can't do this anymore. And I left with my daughter in tow. And for several years, I lived here. Here is a totally different place. I made friends with people who cared about me. It was a whole new feeling. It was really cool. And I started to make different decisions. And then at one point, through all of this beautiful life, I started to realize I'm lonely. And I knew what I didn't want. I wasn't going here ever again. No, there was no way. So I said, I'm going to stay over here. And I overshot. And I ended up in a relationship with a man who was in an emotional coma. Wake up, wake up. He never did. It was really difficult. This man was so disconnected, so passive and the remote was glued to his hand, so he wouldn't have even dropped it to throw a glass of water on me if I was on fire. This man was not there, and I couldn't take it anymore. Why did I get there? This is a spectrum. I just walked across the stage. I started over here, and we recognize this spectrum. Deep, deep sadness can feel a lot like deep depression, or maybe we're way on the other side, and we're manic, and we're excited about life, but there's a nice, happy place in the middle. It's called serenity. It's called calm. And this is where healthy relationships live. Same with confidence, right? For not very confident, maybe we're a little angry, or maybe we're a little fearful. So we want to live somewhere in the middle. And how do we get there? Well, there's a few rules to getting there. But first we need to understand where it came from, because it did come from someplace. Remember I was telling you about the first guy, the PTSD? We talked about trauma. What did we talk about? PTSD. It's right in the name, right? So we all know about this. I lived with complex post-traumatic stress disorder, which is typically something you figure out in childhood. You are in a pattern of behavior to protect yourself, and that's a form of trauma. And trauma doesn't live in the center. It always lives on the outside, on an extremity. We can all go there. We all have moments. But if we're living there, that's a problem. So for 20 years, I was with a man who silenced me. The first argument I had with my ex-husband was on the last night of our honeymoon. And it was over a $20 bottle of wine. He didn't want to waste the money. He needed to control the money. He didn't feel safe. I went, oh, I've upset him. That was the genesis of my people-pleasing ways. When I was with this guy, I wasn't a people-pleaser. I was like, what are you doing now? Right? That's what he triggered in me. I could fight him. But this man So passive. Poor dear boy, he must be depressed. I really believed it. And actually, my background, you should know, is as a mental health counselor and crisis interventionist. Well, for the last 10 years of this 2-decade-long marriage, I became depressed, seriously so. I was sitting on the other side of that desk of mental health. I did not enjoy that either. This was a difficult place to be. And it didn't happen right away. For the first year when we were living together, he was perfect. He said everything I wanted to say. We heard someone this morning talk about masking. Monica, when she spoke, how we mask our true selves. That's what he was doing for that year. We all do it to a certain extent, right? I've been guilty of it. If you haven't, you just haven't been aware. We all do it, right? Human nature. So how do we get to the middle? Because I knew I wasn't going to live there anymore, and I needed to get out. Because when I was over here, and this is extreme, when I was speaking to a trauma therapist, it was because I had decided that living was a little difficult. And when I told my ex-husband, he said, "We don't need to talk about that. Besides, I got to go to work. Maybe you can get some pills." Why did he do this? This is the thing, is these two men were my best teachers. They taught me what I needed to know about myself. I learned all this at my mother's knee. This was acceptable and this was acceptable. And this is why. Let me introduce you to my mother and father. This is Daddy. And this is Mother. Chronically in and out of psych wards. It's a very difficult thing. And it's global. It's not for people who are rich or poor or whatever. Everybody gets hit. When I worked as a crisis interventionist, I worked in a refuge at one point, in a shelter, and our population was the psychiatric ward. When they would release them and say, "You need to go home now. We don't want you here anymore. We need the bed." We all hear that. So they would send them to us first because they wanted them to sort of stabilize on their meds. Well, we would watch them, and we would meet with them every day, of course, and we would see their families and their loved ones and their friends. And then when we were in the staff room, out of your earshot, we would say, "I don't think that guy's going to make it." We would talk about the potential outcomes. And they were kind of easy to spot. We just had to look at the family dynamics. We just had to look at who showed up and told them, "Well, if you just did this." And we knew these people would be shamed into staying as sick as they were. And that's what I was experiencing in this particular marriage. And once I figured it out, I became stronger for it. I was able to heal the dynamics between dad and mom, and first husband and second husband, and that dog that bit me. Everybody, it just makes sense. It's trauma. The person who hurt you is traumatized. Just like when you're not at your best, you're over here, or you're over there, so are they. And when we live in the center, we start to learn something different. We learn that we deserve better because we matter. We matter. So how do we know if we're being a people pleaser like I became? And that's the people, the population I love to help now, is how to reclaim who you were. And who I was when I lived in the middle after I left the first guy. This is before I moved back to be near my family, because when I left this guy, we were kind of in an economically depressed area, and I had a daughter who was a single mom. I had to be subsidized by welfare. Boy, did I hate that. And I thought, well, if I go to a bigger center, so I went back to Montreal. But now, what was the environment I had placed myself in? And what did they kind of push me towards? Well, you didn't like that one, maybe this one. And I didn't have the wherewithal to say, no. I matter. I need to be where people think I matter. And I didn't know how to ask for it even. But I figured it out. I started looking at what was I teaching people while I was a mental health worker. So let's talk about trauma for a minute. Trauma, the way I explain the difference between the PTSD and the CPTSD, if you have a boulder and it gets struck by lightning, July 12th, 1927, whatever. Oh, that was the night of the big storm. That's when that boulder was broken. Everybody remembers this. But what happens if it's like just seems insignificant. Oh, we don't need to do that. Let's just dismiss that. Let's just avoid this. When we do that, that's like a drip, drip, drip. And I remember in elementary school learning that there was a big boulder and there was a drip of water that fell. What happened to that boulder over many, many, many years? Classroom, what happened was it bored a tiny little hole, kind of imperceptible, and it was just a drip. And just imperceptible, and it went down, and then eventually the boulder just cracked and they didn't know why. There was a drip, drip of water, and that's complex post-traumatic stress disorder. That's what happens in our childhood. All the uncaring, the no's, the rejection, over and over again. It impacts us. So now that we know why, what do we do? And how do we know that we're starting to people please right now? So I'm going to give you 2 tools that transformed many, many lives, including my own. When I was a mental health worker, one of the things I taught was different courses on personality disordered people, but not to the people who suffered, but their families and loved ones. And Susan Forward created this model, FOG, fog. Just remember those 3 right away and breathe into them and see. Someone's making a request and you feel F, fear of rejection, fear of abandonment, fear of, I'm going to fail this. Oh, you feel obligated. You have to do it. G, that's the Jewish mother and the Catholic mother's favorite tool, guilt. Am I saying yes out of fear, obligation, or guilt? If those are my primary core emotions that's making me want to say yes, then I am not making myself matter enough. So, how do we know that we've got the right kind of people where I matter? And this was my favorite model, the 5 S's. If you want to know if these people are worthy of being in your life, ask yourself these 5 questions. When I am with this person, do I feel seen? When I am with this person, do I feel emotionally safe? That means I want to kind of knock this around, and it kind of might sound dumb. And what are they going to, if we don't think, what are they going to think of me? That's a safe person. If you are with this person, do you feel you are significant? When I was told, just go get some pills, I got to go to work, I did not feel significant. In attachment, this is a psychological, like when we emotionally attach to someone, there's different ways of attaching. The best way is to be securely attached. And that's where there's a deep mutual respect for one another, and we're on guard for each other's hearts. That's secure attachment. You have somebody like that, keep them close. And the best one for me that I did not experience in that marriage was if you're in emotional distress, they will support you. They will soothe you. They want to care about you. You deserve it because you matter. And when you create that circle where you are living, where you matter, these 5 S's exist in your relationships. Now here's a sad truth. We just heard from Pam. Her father at the end was not in that circle. We need boundaries around this circle. There are people who will see our gentle hearts and they will come after us for our money or our time or piggybacking on our name. We have to learn to say no, and we need these boundaries. Those 5 S's, by the way, I want to be really clear. This is a friend. There's a whole other list for romantic relationships, so come see me after. So when we think about how did I get here? Be grateful for these teachers. Be grateful that they highlighted what I needed to heal. We all matter. And when I work with people and I say, hey, you're not broken, honey. You really aren't. All this can be healed. This is not a permanent break. But we need some tools. And I start by creating a space that is safe, where they feel seen, where they feel supported, where they feel significant, and professionally, appropriately, securely attached. People pleasers get overly attached. It's a trauma response. So I invite you to look into your own lives. Who is making you react out of fear or obligation or guilt? Who makes you feel seen, safe, supported, significant, and securely attached? Those are the people that you need in your life. Now, some of you have taken Steve's courses and are wondering, why the hell did she put a piece of paper on the floor? Right? Because I needed to remind myself that I matter, and so do you. Thank you.